Subodh, where are you joining in from? Which city? Can you just put it in the chat box? Vikram said, hi, Vikram. Good to see you after a long time. You're joining in from Mumbai. Yes. Atul, where are you joining in from? Which city are you joining in from? That is Yash. Where are you joining in from? Can you just put in the name of the city? Pune, Mumbai. Okay. So I think a lot of people from Pune and Mumbai. And then we have spurts from Kolkata, Ahmedabad, Indore. I still haven't seen anybody from Gurgaon or Delhi yet. There must be somebody. Okay. Yes, that's Yash. Yash says Delhi. I thought so. There we have. Welcome, Yash.
I think we can get started now, Tabish. Looks like
I think we should. We waited for 5 minutes and I think we should get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining in, and I appreciate all of those people who joined in a couple of minutes in advance of 11 o'clock and have been patient enough to wait for the last 5, 7, 8 minutes or so. So thank you, really appreciate it. So today, just to share with you a couple of points of what I intend to go over along with Vivek today is, start with really basic. So this session is really meant for entrepreneurs and people who are spearheading organizations that have an employee base already set up, and we're looking at how can we leverage this as a benefit scheme. But more importantly, we'll really get started looking at in a very simplistic manner, why should anybody really understand about ESOP? Why is that so important? So we'll get started with looking at that part, and then we'll look at what really makes ESOP viable for a company. Okay, what is it that really makes ESOP viable? Because we've heard, I've heard many people say that yes, I've heard of ESOP being implemented by public companies, but I'm a small business, or I'm much significantly smaller than those companies, or I'm a growing company, so I'm not really sure whether this is an option for me. And I thought this is a very good area that we should deep dive into to really peel the layers of the onion and understand whether this is really fit for me as an organization. So that's where I think we want to go in. And of course, then every with every benefit or scheme that comes up, and every strategy that you are going to be implementing, there are some pros and cons, and it's best that you be aware of what the pitfalls are. Rather, I think bad choice of word here, it's not pitfalls. You should be aware about both the pros and cons that are available, so that whether this is a risk that I can take and move forward. Of course, throughout the session, feel free to raise as many questions as you'd like, because the session is mainly for you. And we're all going to be learning. I'm going to be learning. I'm sure Vivek will learn from you, and you will learn from the rest of the other people in the audience as well. Every time you post in a question, ensure that you are using the chat box with the option in the drop down as everyone. Okay, so people will also learn from the stuff that you're raising. Towards the end of the session, I'm going to give you an opportunity to set up a one-on-one call either with Vivek or with me if you have specific questions for your business. I know today we're going to be doing a lot of discussions which could be generic for some of you, because I want to make this beneficial for everybody and as many companies as possible. But if there is something that you have very specific to your company, then it would be best that you actually reach out to one of us. Of course, we're available to ensure that your doubts are clarified, and then this is the only forum that we can ensure that you will get the attention to sort out. So let's get started. I think with that, I just want to give you, some of you I've already, I know, and Vivek probably also knows a lot of you here. For those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, I thought I'll just give you a little background of who I am. So of course, mechanically or academically, a mechanical engineer. and I say that right in the beginning because I don't want to be, coming back to that point again, because I'm no longer doing any of my engineering work, but I'm doing so much of entrepreneurial work purely. I have been coaching and mentoring SME entrepreneurs now for the last 8 years. Overall, I have about 29 years of industry experience. And I think the whole IT experience that I'm carrying, having worked with Persistent, having worked with Barclays, and also my very first company, Thermax Limited, where I joined as a trainee engineer, kind of helps me shape up the experience that I have working with software companies, both in India as well as abroad. We're a franchise partner of Action Coach here in India, and I think we are one of the largest coaching businesses within the Action Coach framework. I've also worked very, very closely with Engage and Grow in Australia, and I'm a certified coach with them as well that focuses purely in the employee engagement area, which is very, very apt for the software industry specifically. And of course, I'm a Money and You graduate. The reason I'm giving you all of this background is, let me tell you guys, that I focus on predominantly helping companies scale up. And that's why for me, looking at strategies that will help entrepreneurs get set up for success is very, very important. And literally, I speak with more than 5 business owners every single day. And that's the kind of experience I come with. And I chose this particular topic for you and to bring it out to our community because I think it has a big implication. A little background about Vivek, my good friend, who's actually also ex-Persistent. That's how, we have something very much in common, and we bring in the same mindset and the working styles as well, to be honest. And I love the kind of work that Vivek does. He's a professional corporate lawyer, company secretary, and an entrepreneur. Has been practicing for the last 28 years now. Vivek, have I captured that right? Is it 28, 29, or are you younger than me?
We were practicing for 9 years. The rest of it has been in the corporate world. Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'm still older than you are. Great.
A woman saying this makes a lot of noise.
So you've co-founded Legal Logic Consulting with another 2 good friends of mine, Sridhar and Vikas, Vivek.
That is correct.
Yep. And actually, you're a lawyer that focuses on a very difficult space, which a lot of people would actually stay away from because of its complexity. You actually help with VC funding, M&A, JV, and of course, helping companies or entrepreneurs to really achieve their best dreams, which is going IPO. And that's the complex space that you actually work in. Very, very few, lawyers venture into this area full-fledged because of the complexities. And I think you've really made a dent in the market in this space. So kudos to you guys. You also specialize in employee policy structuring. A very specific team of yours handles this, and you help companies implement ESOPs. I think I have probably met at least 5 or 6 people after we launched and announced the webinar who reached out to me saying, hey, Vivek is a great guy. We've actually implemented ESOP with him. So superb. So a lot of people have actually directly worked with you and have seen success. You're ex-Persistent, ex-Kirloskar Pneumatics, and ex-Siemens. Have I captured that correctly?
That's correct, Tavish. Thank you.
Excellent. So, guys, I said in the beginning that I work with companies helping them grow and scale, and that's my focus area. And I'll tell you something that's been, on my mind all the time. Specifically post-COVID, I realized that most of the companies have experienced and entrepreneurs have been, seeing a difficult situation in terms of acquisition of talent and retention. And the scenarios have drastically changed. We went from an average of about 12 to 13% of attrition to a significant jump of about anything between 25 to 30% of attrition in most companies. And this was, all started roller coasting all the way from the enterprise organizations to SMEs to really small startups as well. Nobody was spared. It was, there was a big shift that started to happen, and there's there's been a churn. It kind of feels it's starting to settle down, but I think there are a lot of lessons that we have to learn from that particular phase of the pandemic. And now that we're still recuperating, which got me thinking that hiring, there's been a bit of a hiring trauma, and I think this kind of plagues a lot of companies. I feel one of the things that makes hiring feel so difficult is because the amount of effort that you put in terms of hiring, and you can validate that in the chat box and let me know what your thoughts are. But I feel the amount of effort that you put into hiring, because remember in the earlier days we used to kind of interview 10 people and then land up hiring one. That proportion has now completely changed, and we are in a position where we have to literally go after 100 of them, 100 resumes, shortlisting them down to your first level interview, second level interview, third round offer. And even after offer, people don't turn up. A number of people drop out at the interview stage itself, and you land up chasing them and they don't even show up, and you're left wondering why these guys are not showing up, even though you're willing to give them a good pay package or you're willing to give them all the perks that there are. But there's a lot of hit and miss. So it's kind of like 1:100 proportion, which means the element of effort that we put into hiring itself has significantly gone up. And I feel the time you spend on the hiring process itself versus the impact that you create for yourself hiring quality employees is very, very low. And that feels very overwhelming. Of course, there are strategies on how you can turn this around, and I do help companies put those strategies in place in terms of ensuring that we can automate certain areas and ensure that we can get faster turnaround. The other very important aspect I think I'd like to highlight is when you start automating, you're actually reversing this whole trauma, and you can cut short the turnaround times and cut short what I say the TAT and the total cycle time of hire. So that's some of the areas that I speak on and help companies, but that's not the agenda that we're going to go in for today. But another area I wanted to highlight is looking at the employee engagement. And this is not just for India, this is actually a global phenomenon that is happening. So if it's happening in your company as well, and you feel that this is the case, we have experienced that the level of engagement is also on the decline, and more people every time they see a little, the smallest fanciest boat that's going by the side, people would want to jump the boat and move across. I think the Gallup statistics says that the highly engaged set of people, and when I say highly engaged, these are the ones who deliver more than what you expect. Okay. There's a little difference. Engaged employees are they are your A players. They are the ones who go over and beyond what you expect and give it their best shot. They're the ones you really don't need to follow up with. They're self-driven and will drive. That set of people in any organization is around 13%. And I think 13% was the global figure as well as for India when I checked last. The set of the vast set of people in any company is the disengaged set of people. And when I say disengaged, you'll be surprised that these are the people who are just getting along. They come into the office at 9 o'clock and they come in exactly on time, they leave exactly on time. This is the set of people who will deliver exactly what you've asked. They are average players. They'd never go over and beyond. So they are the ones who are actually sitting in the boat, going along with everybody else. But all of the heavy lifting work is just being done by 13% people who are rowing your ship. The rest of them are just, going along with the rest of the others. So that percentage of disengaged that you see in the center, yellow typically as per Gallup, is close to about 66%. Okay, 66% of people are disengaged in an organization, and the level of highly disengaged people is close to about 21%. This is the proportion that has been surveyed, and you realize that it causes massive impact in organization. Now we want to turn the disengaged people, which are the yellow guys, to shift into the green bucket, and we want to let go of the red guys. There's nothing that you can do. They're like parasites in the organization. They actually don't leave. The people who leave your company are the yellow guys. Okay, isn't that interesting? Red guys just stick in the company, and they kind of anchor the whole boat. And all of the effort that the green guys are putting in becomes more and more tedious. So we need to come up with a very concrete strategy that will help more and more guys shift into green. That's what we're looking for. And I think ESOP is a definite area that you could consider to move into this direction. Okay. So I'll come to you, Vivek, from here, looking at ESOP as a a strategy, but tell me, have you experienced this as well, where your customers are talking to you about employee engagement, talking about challenges related to hiring, etc., or is it just me who's feeling this?
Tabish, thank you first of all for setting this up. This is a very important topic, and thank you everyone for joining in. I know it's a Saturday, nice weather. There are multiple things that you could do. You chose to be on this seminar. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll take something clearly end of this session that Tabish has set up. Tabish, thank you so much. My sense is that. In last about 2 years, the ESOP is back with vengeance. Clearly, it is for all the reasons that you mentioned and more. And what is more important is if you look at this particular slide, it's of course dated and more is talked about all of these companies these days. If you look at the ESOP pool of the large scale startups, that's what is the validation as to why ESOP is back in motion and back with vengeance. Whenever there is a validity and validation of something at a large scale, those things become gold standard. And ESOP therefore has become gold standard in past 24 months, 36 months, as you see. And it continues to be at a frantic pace is what we see all our clients, startups, large companies, mid-sized companies, all of them are using ESOP as one of the tool in terms of attracting talent, in terms of retaining talent, in terms of making sure that the talent remains engaged. And as Tabish rightly said, how many greens can you make is the challenge that you are looking at. And as someone was putting in the chat box that, folks who are in the mid-tier in their overall situation with 5+ years of experience, they understand these ESOP, they have tested it in the past or have seen their friends look at this in greater depth. And that's the reason why they actually choose companies who are looking at one of the tools in terms of compensating and creating wealth in the long run as ESOP. That's my experience of late, Tabish.
Excellent. So that kind of validates completely. But ESOP is not really as popular. So I know you've put in a lot of startup numbers and names of companies, but it's still not very, very popular, and it's still gaining popularity, I would say, in the SME world. And what is it about ESOP? I think let's get started to really understand ESOP very well. So tell us, what is ESOP really? What is it all about?
So ESOP is about engaging, apart from whatever we talk about, Tabish, end of the day, these are all tools to engage with the right set of people, with ability to do something in the long term. I call this as phenomenon where someone's wanting to build a balance sheet for you versus your P&L. And let me explain what I'm trying to say. The compensation that you pay, which is a cash compensation, is a P&L item, right? It's an expense. And
Yes.
you start a year and you end a year, and that is your overall expense on the employee comp. ESOP is from a long-term standpoint for someone who's building your balance sheet, which means that it continues to remain valid, not just for 1 year, but over a long period of time. And therefore, you must distinguish one versus the other in terms of what is this ESOP all about. And ESOP is about creating long-term wealth and sharing that long-term wealth. And remember, it is jointly built, not just the responsibility of the founder, but the whole team. And what ESOP therefore does is engages people and makes people have skin in the game to make sure that the total value of the company increases dramatically. And this is one of the ways of making sure that the value that is increasing is shared across. And these numbers on this slide demonstrate as to what is the value. And let me give another example. A company which is going for a funding and says that I am 40 crore worth today, what we call as a pre-money value before I go out, and maybe I'm raising 10 crore in funding. So the post-money value of the company after the funding round is 50 crores. And if you say that I'm 10% of the company in ESOP, you're effectively saying that 5 crore worth of stock is being given to employees. Now the question is that the investor invests not just at that round, but he's investing with a 2x, 3x, 5x return. And therefore, he has an assumption that when he makes 10 crore of investment, he's going to go and get 50 crore exit. That's the assumption with which people go. And same is with ESOP. If the investor gets a 5x return, the employees get 5x return. So this 5 crore today is going to be worth 25 crore. And that's the game that the employee plays along with the founders to make this company grow from a 5 crore to a 25 crore worth of ESOP. And that's the way someone needs to look at what is ESOP. ESOP is not about the plan. ESOP is not just about the plan. I must say, ESOP is about sharing this value, which is a tangible value of a company with the employees as we go along and who help build the balance sheet.
Right. So, in simplistic words, what you're saying is ESOP is a form of currency which is not printed by the RBI, but it's actually entrepreneur's asset which he kind of shares with the employee. And the best part is it doesn't come in your cash expenses.
There are nuances to it. And I'm going to leave those nuances for a later time because this is not a purely a technical session. There's some cost attached to it in terms of a P&L hit that you take. But you're right, it's not a cash outflow. It comes from the market. It comes because you're building a value in the market and the market pays for it. When you do an IPO, when you do an M&A event, when you do an investment, all of this effectively gives a tangibility to what is a paper at the time when it is given to an employee. So the question is, how do you convert this paper into a value? It's a joint effort. And that's the beautiful journey that you will essentially take when you look at ESOP from an employee standpoint. And from an employer standpoint, you want more of those greens in your picture. And I like that picture, Tabish. Thanks for putting that up. Is that you want more yellows to get converted into greens. And this actually does help. And there is a lot of empirical data that suggests that there is a clear, there's a very clear message that ESOP does to companies, not just for growth, but also for retention as well as, hiring as a strategy. It's a gold standard.
Got it. I think a lot of people would really understand that, yes, this is a great form. So instead of giving cash bonus or performance, bonuses straight away in cash, I might actually ask an employee to subscribe or opt in for the ESOP plan, which is actually not just going to make them rich now, it will be on a long-term basis. It's going to be creating wealth for them on a much significantly longer term basis. That's one of the major benefits. But tell me, once an organization decides to launch an ESOP scheme, is it mandatory that you actually give that option to all employees?
It is not mandatory. You have a choice and you must make that choice. Do you want to be democratic, which is, to everyone? And remember that you only have a limited pool. It depends on what stage your company is. If you're a product company with only 15 people, 20 people as your team at this point in time, obviously you could distribute it to all. If you're a services company with 100 people, 200 people, 300 people at this point in time, and you want to launch ESOP now, it is difficult for you to reward everyone. And if you do, everyone gets a very small number, and then it defeats the purpose. What you're trying to do is to see as to one who needs this and who will appreciate this. And my view is people who are younger, they have cash needs, most of them. A general statement always has exception. But when you are young, you're looking at building your home, your first car, and the social needs and what have you. You effectively need cash. You can't say that this will get converted into cash. You need that cash today. So for them, this may be a tool which possibly is attractive to them once their relative cash needs are satisfied. And therefore, you need to pick and choose as to who's the right audience that you give. And you have to choose whether you want to be completely democratic or you want to keep filters in terms of making sure that someone who's been with the company for 2 years, just as an example, or at a certain position, or in a certain function, or any of these combinations could possibly be act as filters before you think about it. Two things important, Tabish. One is what is your overall pool, and what is your objective of ESOP. It's a very important understanding that someone who's creating ESOP must have. Is this in lieu of compensation? Then obviously everyone will expect that, right? Is it a retention tool? Is it a wealth builder tool? What is it that you are wanting it as the main object? And obviously there are ancillary object that comes along with it. But what is important for you to understand is if you are a growth company, you are in a hyper growth mode, and you are actually a stable but hyper growth company, a different approach needs to be looked upon between one as to someone who's stagnant for some reason and they want to expect that the growth needs to come. Your approach will be different. So the answer to your question is not one cut fit all, but it has to be looked upon along with multiple variables that the company is operating at a given point in time, and it will change over a period of time. For example, ESOP, you don't give all ESOPs that you create on day zero. You do it in a gradual manner, and your objectives could change because your what we call as theory of constraint. Your constraint today could be hiring, and tomorrow it could be retention, and after that it could be hiring at a very senior level. Some people who are CXO, and therefore it's a different approach that you take ESOP depending on what is your objective and what stage of the company that you are in.
Right. There are a lot of companies that specifically in the software domain where we're actually trying to look at hiring more and more sales staff, for example, in countries outside of India. So let's say I'm working with the US or I'm working with Europe and I want to hire a salesperson positioned there in that particular country. Can somebody who is a non-Indian also participate in an ESOP scheme?
Yes, you can. Both companies who are incorporated outside of India, think about a Microsoft or a Cisco or these large companies. They have a lot of employees in India and they have ESOPs and what have you. That all is permitted. And so is India company, which is like a Persistent one. And this is all public information. So Persistent has subsidiaries outside of India, and they have issued ESOPs to those who are employees of subsidiary and not just Persistent India. Both sides possible, what we call as an inward into India and outward outside of India. Both are possible. There are laws that you need to comply under foreign exchange regulations and so on and so forth. But answer to your question is yes, it's doable through following a particular process.
Right. So, again, another scenario that comes to my mind is every time you're looking to hire a senior resource, let's say I want to onboard a CTO or I want to bring in a co-founder into the organization, a senior leadership person, usually there are talks about the person also negotiating their salary with an add-on equity share. Okay, is ESOP and equity share the same?
let's break it into two parts. What we start to call this as a MSOP, which is Management Stock Option Plan, and not an ESOP to people who are at a CXO level. Because, you know, what you're trying to do is to create a customized, a curated plan demonstrating what is the behavior that you want from the CXO. To give you an example, someone who's a salesperson, you want the salesperson to start kicking in from day one and start kicking in revenues as soon as possible. Against that, someone who's a CTO, someone who's a CFO, you're looking at him to be consistent through a long period of time, and what they deliver to you will have an implication in the longer run and not maybe immediately. And therefore, your behavior with them will be a back-ended plan where as they grow with the company and the more time that they spend with the company, you will have a better outcome. And therefore, with CXOs, you generally customize these plans called as MSOP. And within the same plan, you could have two segments. One we call as MSOP, where you say that, 5% of my company is only for management stock options and the rest is for the employee stock options. And these CXOs will dip into the first pool because they will get a larger, less number, but larger, less in number to receive, but larger share to receive. So, they will have maybe 1% of the company, 2% of the company, or 3% of the company at one level, and you then bifurcate. There's another way you do it, Tabish, to your question, is that you directly give them equity. Okay. So the founder may say that, what, I'm willing to give you ESOP or MSOP, while also give you direct equity to start with. Of course, it comes with a condition, and we call that as a reverse vesting, where you continue to have a lock-in position for them, and they claw back into the founder or to the company, depending on how you set it up. If someone is given stocks upfront, that's the way you could do it, both through MSOP/ESOP or direct equity plus ESOP. Both of them are possible.
Wow. So there are multiple options actually to pick and choose, and not just one. That's great. I don't think a lot of us really knew about all of these complexities, and MSOP was a very interesting area that you highlighted. So thanks for that. So let's look at, what does it take to set up an ESOP scheme? How do we go about it? If somebody wants to actually get started, what should be like, step one, step two?
The way we work, Tabish, is we build a very structured questionnaire, and we discuss this with our clients. And let me tell you what that questionnaire is all about. The questionnaire is about, understanding the objectives for which you are trying to do the ESOP. What are the major terms, what we call as, what is the grant price? Are you going to give it at 10 rupees, which is your par value? And if the company is in a matured stage and has a value of, say, maybe 200 rupees to a share, then you are giving a significant upside to the employees on day zero if you give a 200 rupee stock at 10 rupee, right? Just as an example. Right. The questions are based on these things, which will prompt the company and the founder to think what is the direction that they want to take. And what we'd like to do is to give them a chance of doing it themselves before we step in. Because if we step in to start with, then they only toe the line that we want to tell. And each company has, as I said, their own theory of constraint, their own constraints that they should try and address at that point in time. And we like to get their mind share through these questionnaire, reflect upon them with them, discuss each aspect of it, and then come to drafting of the plan. Remember, drafting is the easiest thing. You plan deep enough because you don't want, remember, you're giving a 5 crore in my example leading to 25 crore. It's a significant amount you're talking about. And therefore this needs a deeper thought process and a planning for it to reflect into different things. We also prepare companies in terms of they being open to share more data with the employees. because ESOP is all about communication, and we should speak a little more about it later on. But now that you asked this particular question, Tabish, it's important to understand that you have to become a little more open. This is no more my company; it is our company, as Anand continues to say, and that's how the persistent ESOP has benefited a large number of people, because there was a shift from this thinking of my company to our company. And as when you call it's our company, you got to share more details. What's two or three variable factors that you want your employees to look at to determine whether the company is growing or not? Some people may say it's revenue, some people may say it's profit, some people may say number of employees, some people may say all these three parameters are important for us to track to see if we are in a growth trajectory, and does that growth trajectory mean increase in value. And those are important aspects that we help prepare the company about. And everyone's excited, right? When you speak about this ESOP, hey, let's do ESOP, everyone gets excited.
Yeah.
But the important part is that, are you prepared to do this ESOP? Are you prepared to do the communication? Are you prepared to open your hood and say that, guys, this is the information about the company, and because you are participating in ESOP, you have to know how the company is performing. That is a very, very difficult shift. Tabish, I can tell you, it's easy to talk, but when you try and implement that, it's not easy at all. When you start to become transparent and you start to share more data with the employees, it's not easy. So once you're prepared, once you're mentally prepared, then the process part is not difficult. The part about mentally prepared and communication of the ESOP is what makes a good ESOP scheme.
I think, business owner mindset has always been, and me included. Yeah. For me, my revenue is like my own performance report card. So if I'm actually going to talk about, okay, what is the revenue that me and my company are making, and that's going to be out in the open, can feel very overwhelming. And to top it, I also need to give explanation of the entire P&L, which says exactly what am I saving at the end as profitability, which is actually going to go back into the business, and what is the breakdown of expenses as well. All of that will need to be transparent. Have I got that right?
No, absolutely. And I think it is important to educate employees that, profit is not cash. And
exactly. Yes,
they can't say profit is equal to cash. And what does it mean? You want to buy laptops, you want to do your office, all of the cash goes in it. That doesn't show up as such. So what's more important when someone reflects on creating a financial literacy first amongst the employee as they get ESOP, so that they also have a same perspective that you want them to be, but you can't expect them to know it all, and therefore the education has to start first with the employees, telling them what is this about. And I really emphasize on communicating about all of these things before you launch this particular plan. Otherwise, it's a big disaster. Two things, double whammy. One is you've given ESOP, which means you given 5 crore worth of stock. Second, the employee engagement still doesn't happen. So there's a double whammy. You've divested, and it's not helping the cause that you're trying to do that. And therefore, it's important for you as a founder to explain what is it going to get tracked, and not all profit goes in the pockets of the founder, right? I mean, there's so much that the cash needs to be deployed for the future growth for it to actually make sense for the business to grow.
Correct. I think we have an aspiration that a lot of my employees must think like the entrepreneur. We want them to be giving their 100%. Most entrepreneurs are willing to work for themselves 80 hours a day, but unwilling to work for someone else, even if it is 40 hours. That's the difference between employee mindset and entrepreneurial mindset. But to get our team to actually think entrepreneurial mindset, we will have to start treating them like that as well, which means I need to explain to them about expenses and cash and profitability and what is the difference between it. We need to educate them, get them into that mindset, and then you'll start to see the results actually coming in very, very effectively. So if you want to, like, I think when you want an A player, treat them like one.
And don't assume that they know it all. They may not, and genuinely they may not. And from an India perspective, stock market penetration is very limited. It's catching up, but we have to do a lot to get it to what is the world standard in terms of the percentage of your saving going into stock market. And therefore making an assumption, even top CXOs, Tabish, you should not assume that they would know it. You must explain. And when you start to explain, like the session that we are doing today, the multiple questions that pop up, and those questions are so important to address. You can't make an assumption that, hey, Vivek needs to know this. Why should you think so? Yeah. Vivek may not have exposure enough to know about it. And it's your job, if you want to make it successful, to make sure that Vivek steps up, understands that, and Vivek will step up because it's money, it's a value. And why would he not step up? It's your responsibility. You have to take that first step to educate.
Absolutely. I know when, in my persistent days when ESOP was launched, there was this excitement, but there was a whole campaign that was run educating employees, multiple locations, multiple times the same sessions were being repeated for people to attend, really understand. There were FAQs that were circulated even in writing, and it was on the internet, intranet and on the portal for people to reach out and access. There were, people also identified that you could reach out to really understand and get to know more. So yeah, I completely agree. Let's look at, Vivek, what is there a certain kind of a qualification criteria that we should be looking at for a particular company? Who can really consider ESOP? Are there some prerequisites or, some kind of metrics we should be knowing?
Tavish, anyone who wants growth and is on the threshold must do ESOP, meaning, it's a no-brainer today that ESOP, again, this is like this. Are you on LinkedIn? Is that an option today? I don't think there's an option, if you want to be relevant in the marketplace, both for the companies and the employees and whosoever. First you get discovered, and today people don't ask your resume. They just say, send your LinkedIn profile and we will do the rest. I think it's important to understand that ESOP is a gold standard. And anyone who's on a threshold of growth must consider doing ESOP. Must consider, I'm not saying must do ESOP, must consider ESOP, right? I mean, being prepared is important. When to do is for each company to itself, because there are so many variables that play around. But to know what this ESOP is, for those who are joining, guys, you've taken first step at it in terms of trying to understand as to why is this important. So that preparation and being prepared is a very critical aspect, in my opinion, for those companies who are aspiring growth or who are on a threshold of growth. And then obviously those who are looking at an exit, a lot of companies come to us. There's a client of ours, a decently large, he will get around 50-80 million dollar exit. And we spoke 2 days back, and he said, Vivek, we are now at the stage where the exit will happen. Should we do ESOP now? And I said, you know what, we should have, and we've been talking about it for a while, but we then created a plan which will effectively benefit what it would have been if we had created a plan 2 or 3 years back. But again, the taxation doesn't work in the favor of employees when you try and do something very near to the event, etc. Therefore, I always say, plan. When to implement is in your hand. And when you are thinking about it, someone gave me this analogy, Tabish. If you want to buy a new car, and when you are on the road, you only see those models on the road. You feel that, what, I'm going to buy the next Merc, and
Yes.
you only will see the next Merc. I think what I'm trying to say is that it's visualize to realize. And once you have this ESOP back of your mind, you keep talking to your fellow entrepreneurs, you keep talking to a person like me and you, these conversations then fructify into a particular plan. These are not some things that you plan, rather you think about today and you will implement tomorrow. These are 6 months out in terms of conversations. These must take time, because this, once you do this, there is no way you can withdraw it. It's a permanent one, and therefore you must think and do. And therefore I say, those who are on a growth threshold, as well as those who want to grow should consider ESOP. When to implement, up to you.
Right. So this is a very interesting discussion, Vivek. When we are saying growth, and if you look at every entrepreneur's mindset, definition of growth kind of slightly shifts. And I've experienced this just because I'm speaking with so many people all the time. There could be a bootstrapped company. This could be a founder who's, essentially just brings in capital from their own pocket, has really worked it hard, has been in the industry for a significantly long period of time, but is young of age, but still says, I'm a growth company. I'm growing and we're doing well because, okay, year on year, I'm doing 40% or more in terms of revenue. Okay. Vis-a-vis another company who is not just looking to put in their own money, they have leveraged and utilized it, but now are looking for inorganic growth by bringing in external investment, getting like a shareholding with them. I'm going to share the risk of owning the company and the growth that is coming in. So is ESOP specifically, still valid and true and a great scheme for both these different types of companies, or is it just for either one of them in particular?
No, it is true for both, Tavish. You're right. I mean, both sets of companies look at, and again, there are reasons why you may not have done ESOP while possibly I did it at a stage you were, say, 4 years back. Okay, there are various reasons, and people learn over a period of time. As it is today, and while I grew in 4 years, you may be at the position where I was 4 years back, but you've done ESOP before me. And there are valid reasons why you've done that. Doesn't mean that I should not be thinking of ESOP today. I have not lost the bus. Remember that, employee engagement is an ongoing process. Employee hiring and retention is an ongoing process. And what the market has thrown today is really complicated, and it's not just for large companies, for small companies, for everyone. It's all pervasive in terms of what's happening in the marketplace. And therefore, ESOP as a tool is relevant for all shapes and size, all types of companies. Very small companies who are under 10 people who have just started, and they're trying to find a feet, and they're just trying to determine as to what is the right business model for them. They may want to wait out a little bit before they find stability, and they then see a growth with one or two or three products, or maybe customers or something that gives them a sense of stability in some way, and therefore the growth as such. You're trying to do it when you are really small, or you're trying to do it only for one or two employees, then I would suggest there are better ways of dealing with it, because ESOP comes with some maintenance. There's a valuation, there's a bunch of things that come along with it, and you therefore have to evaluate the cost aspect of it. And are there any alternatives? For example, if you're wanting to give only to two people out of your company, then I would, which is what I called as a clawback situation. If they don't perform, then, or if they don't complete the tenure, then the shares come back. Those are possibly a better approaches to take rather than do a full-fledged ESOP. But barring that, few corner situations, to evaluate whether you should be doing an ESOP, it's clear in my mind that all shapes and size, and at any stage of your life, once you cross that first hump of the stability, I think you should think about ESOP. When to implement, as I said, up to you.
Right. But it doesn't have an implication on, you must be X crores in revenue, and only then you should be considering. That's what you're taking off the table completely.
No, absolutely. I don't think so. For example, a product company, right? I mean, they could be pre-revenue, but large in value. And multiple such examples where, the revenue may not be a situation. Most of the time, the investors will force you to do an ESOP before they come on cap table, because they don't want to dilute in favor of ESOP. Okay. Maybe incremental ESOP, they will be okay. But at the start, they would force you to have an ESOP. And if you think that you are investment ready, I would insist that you do an ESOP, because then you're not doing what investor wants you to do, but you will do what you want to do. So you have complete control of the company before you've done an investment round, and therefore I would do ESOP, a full-fledged plan, before I go out in the market, because in any case the investor is going to force you to do an ESOP. He won't dilute in favor of the base ESOP. If you top it up, obviously whosoever is part of the cap table dilutes proportionately. But then to start with, the investors will not agree to do a dilution for ESOP.
So would it be a good idea for you to actually launch an ESOP in your company before you go out for looking for investment?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to suggest and recommend to all our clients, saying that, what, in any case you are going to be forced, so do it on your terms rather than do it on investors' terms as such. And there is enough empirical data to suggest that investors don't like diluting on the base ESOP while they come in.
Right. But I'm also thinking about a different scenario while I'm speaking to you, Vivek. I'm sure everybody has experienced that every time there's this performance appraisal cycle time, and you've just about rolled out a promotion or given out a increment letter to an employee, and with the intention, of course, of retention and to acknowledge their performance, but you didn't know that they were actually going to use that same letter to go out and get a job with a higher salary. So I do realize, and I'm conscious that this happens when you actually commit to start paying directly in salary as bonus. But can the same thing happen with ESOP as well, that you've just announced that you're going to be giving ESOPs to a set of employees, and one of them decides to move out, and can they use that to negotiate in their new employer or the company that they're applying to?
I mean, again, Tabish, it's up to the company and the founder to communicate what value are we trying to create, okay? And what does this ESOP mean to you, without making a promise, because you can't predict future. It's all going to be a joint teamwork with these people who are recipient of ESOP. And to that extent, you will find that this communication is an important one. Having said that, ESOP does not guarantee that a person will stay. The probability increases, right? All that you're trying to do is to make sure that the probability increases. And all that you're trying to communicate to him is that, look, if we work together in 4 years, you will make dramatically more as compared to just mere compensation, which is cash compensation. And to that extent, that growth, how do you measure that growth periodically, needs to get communicated. What we have seen is, like you saw in Persistent, as you explained, the communication was on a quarterly basis. Everyone knew what's happening on the parameters that were being tracked. Like I said, people would track revenue, profit, number of employees, all of that, and then determine whether the company is growing. And if the company is growing, how is the value growing? And what we used to do was to track companies like Infosys and Mindtrees and all of them, and see if as a stack, IT as a sector is growing. And if it is growing, is my company growing in tandem, more or less? And therefore, how is my value growing as such, right? I mean, this engagement with an employee would help you retain him because the value is going to get created. But if you don't communicate and assume that, what, Tabish knows that we are now 100 people company, we were 50 when we gave ESOP, but Tabish may not able to convert what does that 50 to 100 mean in terms of the value. And that is the job of you as a founder. And as you grow, as you get relevant people, relevant professionals, they can take that particular thing for you. Or you might want to have someone as an advisor who could potentially go and communicate this on your behalf, as to, look, what's happening is that the company is growing and therefore the value is growing. What it indirectly tells the employee, that if you leave, you're leaving this much wealth on table, and it's up to you whether you chase cash or whether you chase cash plus the growth, because this could be significantly disruptive in terms of what you actually make end of 4 years if you are with the company which is on a growth trajectory as such.
Okay, so which means when you're launching the ESOP scheme, the entrepreneur would have an option to define how many years the employee needs to actually work with the company to be able to get the benefit of it.
That's correct. And we call this as, let me see if I can pull the slide as I speak, these are the important terminologies that, people would need to know, which is you grant, when you give, you grant. And then there's a grant date and price. At what price did you give? In my earlier example, a 200 rupees stock, have you given it at 10 rupee or 20 rupee or 30 rupee? That's a choice that you make. And then it runs for a particular period. The minimum period is 12 months under law, but in India, what we generally see is a 4-year plan. In the US, we see 5-year plan. And then you have various ways in which you actually look at vesting. Vesting could be time-based. Vesting could be milestone-based. Vesting could be a time-based and milestone-based, which means that if you help deliver X to the company, then it will vest, otherwise not, and things like that. And then you have an exercise, which means that whatever is vested in you, you would go and buy those. If it's a share purchase plan, or if it's a phantom or a cashless one, you will say that give me cash, which is difference between the exercise price and the grant price subject to tax. So these are the three important words: grant, vest, and exercise. ESOP is not more than this, obviously, because it's a long term. There are multiple terms and conditions, and it's a thick document. But principally, you must look at what is the grant, what is the vesting, and what is the exercise. If you know these terminology, more or less, you are master on ESOP.
Master on ESOP. And thank you so much, Vivek. You're one of those lawyers I know who can actually simplify things and tell us in simple English.
Because I only know so much, right?
Thank you so much. So I can see some questions coming in. I'll try and pick some of them right now. Can you give example by numbers of these three terminologies? Oh, okay. So what is granting? What is vesting? So I think, Shruti, that's what you're asking, right? The last slide that.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Let me give you an example and try and give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Think about someone's granted 1,000 options at 10 rupee each to be vested over a period of 4 years equally. So each year you effectively have 250 stocks that would vest in you, that can therefore be exercised by an employee. What is exercise? Exercise means that he pays 250 times 10. 10 is the price at which it was granted to buy that particular stock. And also the perquisite tax. In India, when you exercise, you ought to pay a perquisite tax. And perquisite tax is the difference between the fair market value and the price at which the stock was granted. That is your gain. So for example, if your fair market value is 200 and you gave it at 100 rupees, then you are effectively doing a 190 rupee gain, and you are taxed at your marginal rate of tax. So for example, if you fall at 30% and change that bracket, a highest bracket, then 190, you have to pay that much tax. And then that tax, along with 250 times 10, which is the grant price that you agreed to pay, both of them get deposited with the company. Company will deposit the tax with the treasury, and you then become the owner of 250 stock. You could do it each year to get, and when you complete 4 years of your complete tenure, then you have 1,000 options that were granted to you. They all become yours. If you decide to move out after 2 years, and if half of them were vested in you, you will take 500 options and move on. And the company may determine whether you need to sell before you move on, or company will buy back, or you could continue to hold but cannot trade in those unless you take consent from the company. So multiple those options. But just to simplify, 1,000 options at 10 rupees is what is granted to you. That's your grant price and grant. Suppose it was granted on 1st April 2022 for 4 years. On 1st April 23, 250 of them will vest, and you want to exercise it immediately, you could do that by paying 250 times 10, that's the price at which it was granted, plus the perquisite tax, assuming the price on 1st April 2023, the fair market value was 200, the gain is 190, on which you will pay tax, and then that tax plus 250 times 10 price is what you pay to become owner of 250 stock options. And then it will run 23, 24, 25, 26. On 26, if you are still an employee, you will, and you decide to exercise your vested options, or you may continue to hold those vested options. You need not exercise. You may say that, you know what, I don't want to put in money for a stock which is illiquid because you can't trade in any case. So I'll wait for the liquidity event to happen and then exercise. You could continue to hold. Once vested, unless there is a corner situation where someone commits fraud, someone commits something which he loses his shirt and pant and ESOP, that's a different story. But whatever is vested in you, the company is obligated, that becomes your asset once you exercise. Those exercise terms need to be understood, and then accordingly you play with it.
Yes, you have to be, you're thinking like an owner.
Yes.
Which means if the company is making good money, you will make good money. If the company is not doing well, you will not do well as well on that front. So
that's correct.
Correct. Vivek, we have some time, and I was thinking whether you've been part of Persistent ESOP, and it's now it's a listed company, so we can talk about it. It's public information rather than picking an example of a smaller private company which we can't share. I was thinking whether you can actually give us a little more insights on when did Persistent actually decide to launch ESOP, and what was the journey, and what were the pitfalls or the benefits that they saw. Can you just do a little share?
The good news is Persistent is today a public company. So, all of this information that I'm going to talk about is in public domain. Yeah. And, it's been a phenomenal thing, and all credit to Anand and Dada that they put 20% of the company, which is an outlier in the industry. And when the company was actually doing really well, they put in 20% of the company under ESOP. One of the most I would say successful plan as such. Started on 1st April 2000. Intel had made an investment in Persistent, a very small one, but a marquee name, when they were trying to move 32-bit chip to a 64-bit chip. This was not Intel Capital, but this was Intel 32 fund, which invested. And that was the trigger to create ESOP. The first ESOP was rolled out on 1st April 2000. And, when Persistent went IPO in April of 2010, Persistent had 9 ESOP programs. Because as I said, as the company grew, the company had to keep pace with the changing dynamics. Earlier, it was a democratic plan. Most of the people got ESOP. And then as the numbers started to grow, Persistent started to grow, and the ESOP pool started to remain, what it was, and it was distributed, so the number was small. Then at that point in time, select means the criteria was put in as to who will get it. And it used to be a quarterly grant as to consider as to who is eligible, and we used to reflect on it. It ran for 10 years before people saw money when company went public. And that was possible because it was the communication part of it was immaculate, and people were transparently told. And luckily, the company was growing. Everyone could see that. But it was also made sure that people understood what that growth means. And those were golden years, Tabish, in terms of 2003 to 2008 before the subprime hit. I mean, the 5 years have been a real golden period for the software industry. And those actually helped the company to keep people calm and remain patient in terms of what value was being built. In between that, the perquisite tax got introduced. Okay, there was this unfortunate perquisite tax that came in, and which earlier on, whatever money you made was tax free. Okay, so people who had ESOP prior to, I think, 2006, when if I remember it right, uh, and those who exercised all of that came without any tax as such. And then the tax got introduced, and of course, it's a worldwide phenomenon that ESOP is taxed. And then people made money actually when the company went public. I'll give another example of a couple of other companies who were this was an IPO based liquidity where people then saw what they actually received turn into real cash, which means that you could go and sell that on the stock market and then make and realize the money, right? I mean, the paper actually turned into cash for a lot of people who went public. Now, the slide that I showed with all these numbers, right? I mean, these are many of them at the time when I took this particular slide were private companies. Now, obviously, you have this Paytm, Nika, Policy Bazaar, all of them as a listed company. All this today is a stock which is worth a currency at this point in time, if not printed by RBI, but hopefully, the stock market will pay those who are. Many of our clients who have now got taken over, and those who had ESOP made money at the time when the company actually sold out. And there are multiple such examples sitting in Pune. You've seen this pan India, but even in Pune, you have had so many success stories where people, obviously this is not public information and therefore I'm not taking names, but multiple such exits came with people who had ESOP. They got actually the cash at the time the transaction happened. And how does this happen? Assume that it's a 5% ESOP or 10% ESOP. And if your company is valued at, say, 600 crore, then 10% of it, 60 crores, is distributed to the employees in proportion to the stock that they hold. And it's a large amount of money if you see as compared to what cash salary you would have got over a period of time. So it is about wealth, and it is about either an IPO exit which Persistent did for ESOP, or you had a M&A deal. Many times these companies that you see these large numbers also have in between what we call as a buyback, either from the company or from the investors who say that, what, if you want liquidity, we're willing to participate in buying your stock, and what we call as a buyback of these stock options. That also is now becoming a gold standard where people don't need to wait out for either an M&A event or, for that matter, so for example, Flipkart, it's again in public domain. They did a couple of rounds of buybacks where the employees were allowed to participate, even though the company has not, gone public. They allowed people after, it was taken over by Walmart in terms of participating in that liquidity event. So you have IPO as an example, and you have M&A as an example, and you have these buybacks in between as a marketplace as an example in terms of how people make money.
I think the beautiful journey that you mentioned, Vivek, of Persistent, and I was thinking that ESOPs is like the first baby step that any company who wants to go IPO or get an external funding should actually take, because that kind of sets you up as well. You start to become more and more transparent. You're ready to do that, share the numbers with everybody. Your team is now getting fully engaged, more and more engaged, which means you're shifting people into the green. You've educated them. Compliances start to fall in place. You will start attracting investors even better, because they say, okay, this is a company that has the mindset to share.
Absolutely. I think the governance part comes to the fore. The transparency, your consistency, your discipline in terms of how you put numbers, how you stack them up, how you communicate. All of that is a byproduct of a simple thing as you start to think about ESOP.
ESOP,
And what
right.
we recommend, Tabish, is this is the mindset shift, right? As I was talking about in the earlier part, that this mindset shift must be the first to be implemented before you launch ESOP. You trying to do it as a catch up does not work. It does not get you anything. You must change first and then launch this. But the benefits that you explain are just far too many. And when you announce that, look, the question is from an employee standpoint, what is it and when is it that I'm going to make? And you can't guarantee a time. That this is not something, a cricket match that has to finish in 3.5 hours and stuff like that, right? I mean, it will finish in some shape or form. This is a marathon and continuous run, so you can't promise a timeline. But what you're trying to say is that, look, timeline is immaterial. The question is, are we growing? Are we creating value? And how do we, you and me, are on the same page that the value is going to get created? That takes a lot of effort, both on the front end and the back end, to make it work. So you're right, absolutely, that the byproducts are as important or more important than the plan in itself. And in life, most of the time, that's the way it works.
That's the way, absolutely. Very valid point, Vivek. Thanks. I think we'll come quickly, and I'm just conscious of time. We have another 15 minutes left, and there are a couple of questions coming in. But I want to finish one question from my side before I get open it up completely for the audience. Is let's look at how much does it really cost to get an employee, stock ownership plan actually implemented? How much does it cost? I mean, is it a few thousands? Is it a few lakhs? Is it a few crores? What is it?
Yeah, I think in a ballpark of 150K to 200K is what you must budget as you start to look at it. And a yearly compliance cost of around 75K because of the valuation and the other aspects that as you grow, you have to administer ESOP, etc. So you might want to take help of the software, and that has a cost, etc. So you're looking at around 150K to 200K to set up the ESOP plan, and then another 75K per year to maintain it as it stands. So it's not very expensive, but it is an investment that you're looking at. What we keep telling people is that, look, you're trying to do the most critical aspect of your business. You're trying to retain them. This cost needs to be looked upon, spread over the number of years that the ESOP plan is going to run, or the number of employees that you have. And when you do that, then you don't feel the pinch of what this cost is all about. If you look at it as a pure cost, then people come to us, hey, this looks expensive, should I delay? But the cost of delaying could be far more than the cost of setting it up, right? I mean,
absolutely,
you ought to optimize what is a right thing for you to do. And once you get in a mindset that if you have, say, 100 employees, right? And then when you look at what is it that you're talking about, this is a cost of one party that you throw, right? I mean, and the party is over as the cricket match is over, but the ESOP will run for 4 years, 5 years. The benefit is immense.
Immense. So, even though there is an expense attached with ESOP, I have, and there's a question as well on this from Raghuram, where he's asking, this particular ESOP expense, will it be a separate line item on the P&L identified, and is that deductible expense as per IT?
It is deductible. It is deductible. There have been, a lot of fight that the other companies have done to make sure that, we all benefit. It's a line item as an expense, and that line item is an expense because it is treated under accounting standard as a compensation cost, which is the difference between the fair market value and the value at which you give that option to the employee. That's the gain we're talking about, spread across the number of years of vesting and exercise period. It's a complex Black-Scholes formula that gets you that particular number, but it's a line item, tax deductible.
Excellent. So I think I'm pretty much towards the end of what I had to discuss with you, Vivek. It's been super useful. I'll quickly come to the questions. There are some of them which have come in and everybody on the call, if there are any further questions that you have, you can please feel free to put it in the chat box and I'll start picking them up. I think I have one from Vivek Shende. He says, I think you kind of answered this initially, but I'll still come back again on this. He says, if the company is not public, is the company still required to pay the vested shares exercised by employees?
Right. So, once you have an ESOP plan, Vivek, it's an obligation, uh, and it's an enforceable obligation, which means that even if you're a private company and your plan says that, what is vested can be exercised, then either you're stocking that person out, which means you're giving shares of the company, or you're cashing that person out. That means that, you effectively will give them a phantom ESOP, phantom stock, which is a cashless one. Either of that is possible, but it's an obligation if an employee chooses. What's the option? The option is to the employee to exercise or not. Once he exercises, it's an obligation on the company. It's a one-way street.
Yeah. I mean, it better be a one-way street. Otherwise,
Yes.
I mean,
There's
you're not
no
building
trust, right?
faith.
I
There's
mean,
no
if I can
value.
withdraw, then what's the way of looking at it?
Exactly. Okay, another question from Praveen. He says, if 100-employee service-based organization wants to give ESOP to only 2 or 3 members, is it really worth the exercise?
No, it is not, Praveen. You're absolutely right. And as I was saying, that there are other ways. What I would do in this case is to to allot the shares and do reverse vesting. So the ESOP is the forward one. This is actually a reverse one, because the shares in India, when you allot, have to be fully paid up, or partly paid up, whatever we call that. But essentially, there is an upfront allotment of those shares, and if you want them to stay for 4 years to have a full exercise of those, you keep them in escrow and they get released in favor of the employee if he completes the terms of your allotment. Or if he does not, then it comes back to either the founder or company buys it back at a fairly reduced price, etc., as a kind of a penalty for breach of that particular contract. So you're right. If you're a 100-people company wanting to do it only for 2 or 3, I won't do that kind of expense, because then it does not justify. And then the second thing is that there are better ways of dealing with the same problem with a relatively less expense.
Yep, makes sense. I have another question from Umesh Vivek. He says, by what ways, and I'll read it verbatim, not very technical words, but you'll probably get the theme of what he's trying to understand. By what ways can the ESOPs be redeemed before company goes public? And he says, one is, you mentioned one is buyback, other is while getting bought. Any other methods?
Yeah, I mean, these are the two tangible one. The third could be, say for example, I as a third person, if I'm allowed to purchase and step in and say that, what, Tabish has ESOP, she wants liquidity, and I'm willing to step in to buy her ESOP because I'm bullish on the company. She possibly is as well, but she needs cash today. So what is the way to deal with that? Company says, what, we're not going to use our cash to buy these things. We want to deploy that for growth. And then a third person comes in and buys those. That could be another way of dealing with it. But by and far, that's the way you look at it. Either it's a company buyback, investor buyback, a third person buyback, or you do an M&A and then you do a liquidity. But these are all tangible ways, and we have seen them work today. And many of these companies that are listed are using all and combination of all of these methods to give liquidity to the employees.
Right. Shruti says, what is the minimum amount a company should invest towards ESOPs?
I mean, you don't actually invest. You possibly, the question is that how much minimum percentage you want to keep.
Exactly.
Again, Shruti, that depends on what is your, shape and size of the company, at what stage you are. Are you doing a deep discount ESOP, which are called as RSUs, restricted stock units, and therefore you need to shell very limited number, but they are high impact, etc. So there's no one cut fit all answer to it. But generally investor, and you're a product company, you are a growth oriented company, you are high growth company, they would expect at least 10% of the company under ESOP. Below that, at times the investors are not happy. If it's not an investor driven play, then obviously you could pace your ESOP the manner that you want it. You may not want to create a large pool to start with. You may want to create what is just at this point in time. And if there are no investors and you don't have that pressure, then obviously I will play it as it comes and not do all hog 10% on day zero.
Only zero. Excellent. Vivek, some more detailed questions coming in. I'm going to skip some of them because I think they are far too detailed to be addressed straight away on this call. I think I also have a request to share the recording link, which we will definitely. But I think there's one question again. Ashwin, you're asking, can ESOPs be offered to selected people only? Yes, it can. And Vivek went through a lot in detail. I'm guessing you joined in a little late. So yes, Ashwin also asked another question. He says, what are some of the ways to prime employees to understand the benefits of ESOPs versus cash or salary? So how do you actually get the employee mindset to shift is the question, and very straightforward. We have to educate, train. I don't believe that there's going to be a shortcut to this. You have to be speaking with them and explaining to them what is the benefit of ESOP, so that it's like this. Not everybody still really understands the value of even investing in shares, for that matter. Look at the history of how many of your employees are actually buying mutual funds, buying shares, and thinking wealth creation. And it's important for us to get to be educating them a lot from our side as well. So that was it. I have another question from Praveen. How exactly allotment of shares is different than ESOP?
Yeah. So Praveen, what happens is the allotment is allotment on day zero. He becomes the holder of those shares, whereas ESOP is a futuristic event. The shares means the options get converted into shares over a period of time. Allotment means you are holding those shares on the day the allotment happens. ESOP is over a period of say 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on how you write the plan. So one is an instant gratification, and the second one is late gratification as they come.
Absolutely. So I think we're almost done. We just have the last 5 minutes left, and I think we've covered a lot of the questions. A number of people have questions which are very, very specific. Vivek, can you unshare your screen, please?
I will unshare. I'll just say one thing. There was one question on the differential voting right. What we like to do now is to have the shares that emerge out of ESOP to be non-voting and not with voting rights, simply because what you're sharing is an economic benefit, and not get into any kind of governance and administrative hassles with large. Suppose you have 100 people, 200 people who are under ESOP plan, or even 50 people, to manage them at a later point in time with voting and stuff like that. It's a challenge, and many people have resisted doing ESOP simply because of this. So we have come up with a situation where what results into option into shares is without any voting right. That's one way of making sure, as a philosophy, if you have challenges looking at what is the governance situation and stuff like that, and administrative hassles, you could do a non-voting share that is the differential voting right. Just wanted to keep that all posted. Thank you.
Vivek, anything else that you had on your mind to discuss today which we haven't touched upon at all?
No, I think my only suggestion is that plan well, use right set of people who advise you, because and again, Google gives you half-baked thing. Don't rely on it at all. Beyond a point, you can learn terminology, but the best is that you need to go to a doctor to get the right medicine, is what I would say.
Sure. You should go. Don't rely on Google for all the legal matters. Rely on a real lawyer.
Absolutely. I don't rely on the Google for my health issues. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So, guys, here is Vivek's email ID in case anybody wants to reach out to him. Vivek, I'm assuming we don't have a Calendly link for you set up as yet, but I'll just share your email ID if that's all right.
Sure. Thank you so much.
So that's Vivek's email ID. Anybody who wants to reach out directly to him, please feel free to do that. I'm sure you would have realized by now that he's this huge bundle of knowledge and enthusiasm and has a lot of experience back, so he will be able to handhold you very, very carefully in making this happen. If there's anybody who's actually looking to grow and scale their company and would like to work and explore their business with me, then here's a link that you have, which you can use to set up some time with me. I usually, just like Vivek is super busy, so am I. So please excuse me if there are not too many options on my calendar which you can block, but here are a few that I can share upfront. So feel free to block time, and it's only for people who've taken the trouble to join this particular call. I value, the presence here. So do feel free to do that. And thank you very much, everybody. Vivek and me are here in case if somebody wants to just stay back and still poke in some questions. We're still here for another minute or two. The rest of the others can log off. But I've shared the links with both of you. I've given Vivek's email ID and my link to block time as well. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great rest of the weekend. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm just saying goodbye to everybody. Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks, Amit, Anand, Ashwini, Dilli, Anand Joshi, Ashwini Kulkarni, and Kapil. Thanks, Kapil, Parth, Payal, Raghuram, Ravindra. Thanks, everyone. Sagar, Shantanu, Viren. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, guys. Take care. Okay. I will just put in Vivek's email ID again in case if somebody has missed out and you still want to capture. Here it is. Okay, one more time. And I'm sharing a link in case if you'd like to have a chat with me. Here's the link to book some time as well. Okay, guys. Okay. Thanks, Vivek. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you. Finally, we did the session which we were thinking of.
You do it so well. Lots to learn. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.